Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Interviewing Wednesdays. We're very glad you're with us today. It is April 27th, 2022. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please just open up the Zoom chat window and enter your questions there. Also, you're welcome to put your personal information in there if you'd like to be able to connect with other people who are on the call. That way, it's a great opportunity to network with other people who are also with us today. For those watching on Facebook this morning or this afternoon, thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, please just put your questions into the comment field. I am monitoring that feed. Please note this event is being recorded. It's currently live on Facebook. The recording will be on the Career DFW Facebook page and the Career USA YouTube channel for others to view in the future. By participating in this event, you give consent for your name and picture to appear. Please note that any comments you put in the Zoom chat window will not appear in the recording. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jeff Morris. Back in 2008, I started a website called careerdfw.org, a website to help those who are unemployed in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. In 2012, I started a second website, careerusa.org, to help those around the United States. I have written a book called What I've Learned About Your Job Search That You May Not Know. It is available on Amazon for 15 bucks, or if you see me, you can get it for $10. So you can save $5.
I still can't hear him.
Since 2007, I've been facilitating and leading the North Dallas.
Troy, how can I unmute me again?
The group's been around since the late 1990s. I took it over in 2007, and we have a very interesting program coming up this Friday, which I'll tell you about at the end of this session. And let's see here, next page. And since 2017, I've been a member of the practice interview team. The practice interview team is a great way to practice your interviewing skills. Just as a reminder, your resume and your LinkedIn profile will only get you a phone call. It does not get you a job. So let me hold on here. Let me stop that. Okay. So if you want to, when you get that phone call, it's your interviewing skills that are going to get you that phone call or get you that job. So if you'd like to have more information on the PIT Crew, just reach out to dallaspitcrew.com and you can get all the information you need about that. Let me talk just a second about the Dallas Pit Crew. This is a great way to practice your interviewing skills. They offer interviews. They're totally free. So you're welcome to get a free interview. They do them on Tuesday at 5, Wednesday at 1, and Thursday at 3 o'clock. The reason today, they do not have anybody scheduled. So that's why we're showing a special guest speaker presentation today instead. But if you'd like to schedule an interview, don't wait until you have an interview. They like to say, practice early, practice often. They think that it takes between 3 and 5 times practicing for you to really be comfortable in your interviewing skills. So if you're interested, just send a resume and a job description and what your first and second choice is for times to dallaspitcrew@gmail.com, and they will get something scheduled for you. All right, well, our speaker today is Tony Beshara from Babbage and Associates. He runs and he leads his own Babbage and Associates for years. They're the largest recruiting firm in the Southwest. They are a contingency recruiter, meaning that they don't get paid until they place you into a company. They're not a retained search consultant, and they're not an internal recruiter. They're hired to find some of the hard to fill jobs, and they'll do jobs for Dallas, Austin, and Houston, I believe. And you can go to Babbage and Associates or Babbage.com, and if you want to check out the job postings you have there. This session is pre-recorded, so I'll play this, and if you have any questions, we can answer. Put your questions in the chat window, and we will get those questions answered for you at the very end. So let me turn on the presentation. Firms is like there's the good ones and there's ones you're not really sure of. If you can find something.
Number of different venues, so we'll go mistakes that people make in an initial interview, and then we'll take any questions that you might have. I've prepared this for a number of different venues, so we'll go through some of these really quickly. There we go. I've been doing this since 1973. I've personally placed more than 11,000 candidates on a one-on-one basis. I've probably gotten more than 100,000 people interviews in that period of time. I've written 4 best-selling books on how to find a job. We have a 60-hour online program that we recently rewrote called thejobsearchsolution.com. I am the president of Babich and Associates. We are the oldest placement and recruitment firm in the state of Texas, probably in the Southwest. We do everything that you can imagine except healthcare. We don't do any healthcare. We do banking, finance, accounting, sales, you name it, we do it. 99% of what we do is in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, some Austin, some Houston. So the mistakes that people make in the interviewing process, these are simple mistakes and they're simple to deal with. The first biggest mistake is that they think that they forget that an initial interview, especially all interviews, but especially the initial one, is a selling situation. So many candidates come to me with the idea of they think it's a consumer product. They are looking to, well, what do they want and how do they want it and who do they want it with, instead of recognizing that what they need to do is be selling themselves. And I tell people all the time, you sell yourself until you get to the altar. Until then, nothing matters. And until you get a job offer, nothing matters. So the idea that I'm buying and I have to be concerned about what I'm going to get out of the deal doesn't mean a darn thing until you sell yourself. If you give them enough good reasons of why they ought to hire you, they're going to give you plenty of good reasons of why you ought to go to work there. And if you have it in your head that you're selling all of the time, you won't have a problem. The second one is people have a tendency to think that this is a two-way street. I heard it this morning from a candidate. Well, it's a two-way street. It's not a two-way street. There's the hiring authority, and in this market, there's an average of 14 candidates that are all trying to get the same job you are. It is not a two-way street. It's a 14-way street. Until you get to the altar, it's not a two-way street. Now, once you get to the altar and you want to try to exchange nuptials and try to get together, then it becomes, what can you do for me in the process? But until then, it's not a two-way street. If you give enough good reasons of why they ought to hire you, they're going to give you plenty of good reasons of why you ought to go to work there, and you can worry about that later. I had a candidate the other day, even after my coaching and my teaching, sometimes I wonder, what the heck? But he goes to an interview and he's halfway through the interview and he says, by the way, what does it pay? Yeah, he already knew what it paid because I told him, but he wanted to hear it. He said, well, I just wanted to hear it from the, no. What they can do for you questions, forget them. They're going to answer all of those once they have an idea that they want to hire you. Oops, I'll get this right in a minute. Okay, people have a tendency to focus on what they want in a job. Don't worry about what you want in a job. You got to focus on what the employer wants in the job. If you give an employer what he wants or she wants, then they're going to tell you what they can do for you. If you don't like what they can do for you, you don't have to take the job. We say it here all the time. You can't turn down an offer you don't have. Quit focusing on what you want. I get candidates all of the time and I ask them, what are you looking for in an opportunity? And my goodness, they'll have a litany of things that they want. But then when I ask them, well, what are you going to do for a prospective employer? Well, I'm a good employee and well, and they hadn't thought of that. And that's the most important thing they ought to be thinking about, not what they want in a job, but what does the employer want in the job? And then the fourth mistake is they don't know what they're really selling. I can't tell you the number of candidates I've interviewed over the years where I say, okay, now, what are you selling to a prospective employer? Well, I'm a good employee. I'm just a good employee. Well, how do you know you're a good employee? Well, everybody I've ever worked for said they really like me. Well, yeah, but what specifically are you going to be able to do for them that the other people they're going to interview can't? Well, I have to think about that. Yeah, you really do have to think about that. And you've got to come down to absolute specifics. And I tell people you've got, in fact, I told this to an employer yesterday. The hiring authority is so wrapped up in his process of interviewing, they're going through 5 different kinds of interviews, that the hiring authority is forgetting to look at the candidate's track record. And what the candidate has got to sell is, I have been successful in my past. Here is where I have been successful, and therefore I'm going to be successful for you. And the more specific that a candidate is about where his successes have been, in fact, I recommend the more numbers that you can associate with your success. I increased sales, I collected debt, I somehow come up with as much as many statistical uh, um, issues as to why and how you've been successful, something that's measurable, something that I'm just a good employee, that doesn't tell people anything. If you say, I haven't missed a day of work in 14 years and I've gone the extra mile because I volunteered for this committee and we got this done. The more you quantify things, the better off you're going to be. So you got to know what you're selling. And Jeff brought up something earlier that is really important, that you've got to practice this stuff. It does not come naturally. And I teach it in our job search solution program, and I know Jeff does too, and your all's program does, but you've got to have a lip load of presentations of every job you've had, what you've done, how successful you were, and then communicate the idea that it's going to also be successful for them because you've been successful in the past. The 5th mistake is they can't bridge or articulate for the employer their specific abilities. Rarely are you ever going to run into a job that's exactly like the job you had. So you have to bridge for the hiring authority. I I claim that you've got to make the bridge for them, but you got to do their thinking for them. You've got to be able to say, now look, I was successful in this job. Here's what made me successful in that job. And from what I understand, what you are looking for or you need in the job you're interviewing for are the kind of skills that I have. Here is where I've done it before. And you've got to make that bridge for them. You've got to articulate not just what you've done, but how it applies to what they want done, and literally do their thinking for them. The 6th mistake, poor communication skills. I'm not sure. I don't know. Poor body language, not leaning forward in your chair, not animating enough in the right way. We have a whole course on this in our job search solution. I can't tell you the number of candidates I've seen lose out in deals because of their very poor body language. And it's not because they're sloppy, it's because they're scared. Look, next to death of a spouse, death of a parent, death of a child, coupled with divorce, the 4th most emotional thing we do is look for a job. And it often shows up in the interviewing process. They slouch, they don't speak clearly, they mumble, they don't look people in the eye. And I realize in many professions, it's not common to, I mean, you can get away without looking people in the eye. But in the interviewing process, you can't do that. And as we mentioned earlier, you got to practice this stuff. It does not come naturally, but those communication skills have to be strong. They don't necessarily have to be animated, and they don't necessarily have to be forceful. It's nice if they are, but just as long as you communicate and you make sure that you're communicating the right kind of thing. Answers to questions can be short, and answers to questions could be right to the point, but they have to be the right answers, and it has to come across as interested and professional. Um, and over the past few years, lots of dressing and dressing differently. When I got in this business, everything was coat and tie. It is in our organization too. Every day, coat and tie. But things have changed a little bit, but still slouching and not speaking clearly and mumbling and that kind of thing. People will get lost in the manner in which you speak more than the matter of what you do. Seventh mistake is improper dress and poor body language. I mentioned this a little bit ago. Don't assume everybody's casual. Don't assume that just because I had a candidate show up in a coat and tie, a dress, a suit, and I'll be darned if the guy that was interviewing him wasn't wearing flip-flops and cutoffs. That doesn't matter. You go dressed like you're looking to borrow $1 million. Is somebody going to lend you $1 million? Even if you overdress, it's better to overdress than it is to underdress. And even to this day, I've had candidates go in with a golf shirt this happened the other day. Guy goes in with a golf shirt that was checkered or something. I don't know. The employer said, and then he had a sport coat over it, and it just looked terrible. It looked like the guy just had the sport coat hung up in his car, and didn't matter what he was wearing. He just put the sport coat on. The hiring authority was so distracted by that, he claimed that the candidate was disrespectful because he didn't dress the right way, and it got in the way of the quality of the candidate, because he was actually a pretty good candidate. And he said, well, his excuse was, well, when I even go into the office now, even though we used to work from home, and if I go in dressed like I'm looking for an interview, like I'm looking for a job, they'll know. So well, okay, fine. But if you're going to do that, explain to a hiring authority, look, I came from work. We dress casually there. You can dress casually in a nicer way where it doesn't look so weird as it looked in this particular case. And the hiring authority was so distracted by the whole thing, he never heard what the candidate had to say. And this was a 15-year experienced guy. So it wasn't some kid right out of school. The eighth mistake is not researching the company or the position that a person's interviewing for. You would think with all of the information that we have available to us, LinkedIn, the internet, I mean, my goodness, there's more information out there than you can possibly imagine. I am shocked that even after I teach candidates or sell the idea of do your research on the company and the person you're interviewing and all of that, it's just amazing that people just show up and say, well, I just really haven't had time to go and look the research up, but tell me, what do you do here? And I'm talking professional people that have been around for a while. Look, if you don't show enough interest in the opportunity to do the research on the job and the person that's in it, I've had candidates that have called people in the company to find out about the job, connected with other people that have worked there before. I had a candidate not too long ago. He had read some white papers that the company published. He knew more about the white papers of what the company had published than the guy that was doing the interviewing. And the guy that was doing the interviewing was pretty impressed by that. He said, I learned a lot about my company from your candidate. The guy did the research. It's not that hard to do. It doesn't take all that long, but you just don't look very interested in what you're applying for if you don't do that kind of thing. The ninth mistake is the inability to articulate what you'd like to see in a new job. Now, I'm not talking about money and benefits and parking and PTO and all of that. No, no, no. I'm talking about when somebody asks you, what are you looking for in a job? It's very important for a candidate to come up with intrinsic growth. I'm looking to grow intellectually, spiritually, intrinsically in an opportunity. I'd like to learn more. I'd like to be pressed a little bit. I find in some of the jobs that I've had before, I learned them and I didn't grow personally. You need to be able to communicate where you want to grow personally in a job. Because the truth is, if you're not growing on the inside, intellectually, from your heart, spiritually, in a situation, you'll, after a while, not very interested in the opportunity, and you won't work very hard. Kind of people that are most successful are the kind of people that figure out how to grow mentally and spiritually in their job. And so you need a couple of answers to that. What I'm looking for in a job is an opportunity to grow spiritually and mentally, and I want to be challenged. And from what I understand from talking around and doing my research, people can do that here in this kind of organization. That's why I want to be a part of it. And then the 10th mistake, ugh, they badmouth their present employer or their past employer. And common sense would tell you that you don't do that. Okay. But I guess common sense, even after 47 years of doing this, common sense isn't very common. I just can't, and I warn candidates because when I interview them, they'll say, my company is this and my boss is that. And I realize there are a lot of screwball companies out there. There are a lot of screwball people out there. But you don't go in and talk about your past employer in any other way other than, I really respect the people that I work for. I've enjoyed the opportunity. I've certainly learned a lot. Here are the reasons that I'm looking to leave, and they better be good business reasons. But bad mouthing your employer, saying negative things about them, a hiring authority is going to think and assume that whatever you say about the people you've worked for before, you're going to eventually say about them. So no matter how horrific your situation might be, unless they've stolen money from you, and even then, I'd be careful about that, always have something positive to say. One of my associates here calls it a compliment sandwich. You say something positive about them, and then you give them a reason that is reasonable that you might be leaving for, and then another positive statement so that you couch whatever your reasons you are looking to leave in a positive way rather than a bad mouth way. And then there are also some things that you gotta, these are kind of minor, discussing personal problems in an interview. Well, I'm looking to leave because I'm going through a terrible divorce, or I'm suing my last employer. I had a candidate just last week. The interview was going so well. And he said to the hiring authority, well, I had to sue my last employer for the money that they owed me. End of interview. What do you think an employer is going to think about that? And this guy, what's so funny about it is he threatened to sue him. He never really did sue him. He's still at the same place that he was. He threatened him a year earlier. But do you think an employer wants to hear something like that? They don't. Being late for an interview, if you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, you got to know that wherever you're going to drive to, you got to get there a half hour earlier because we don't build up, we build out. And this is flat. And LBJ is crazy. The toll road is crazy. Every place you drive to is crazy. You got to be there early. And I even have candidates that drive to the place the night before just to be sure that they can get there. And don't necessarily rely on Google Maps. It can take you the wrong place and then you're late. And then, of course, once you're late, not apologizing for being late. I bet this happens even with my candidates, and I deal with professional salespeople, semi-professional salespeople, and that they'll show up late and they won't apologize. I mean, you wouldn't do that anywhere. And now, don't go overboard. If you go in and go, oh my God, I'm late, I'm so sorry I'm late, and all you do is talk about being late, you'll go overboard with it. but apologize for being late. Not closing the interview properly. We've talked about this on this program before, but there are 4 basic questions you have to ask in every interview. They are, first of all, have I made it very clear what my experience and my background is? Does anybody have any questions about what I've done and where I've done it? Lots of people will act like they know what you're talking about in an interviewing situation, but they don't understand. They don't want to appear ignorant, so they'll act like they understand. You'll walk out of the door and then they'll go, I didn't really understand what the guy was talking about. So you ask, are there any clarifications I need to make about my experience or my background? Secondly, how does my experience and background stack up with what you're looking for? If I'm in your shoes, what strengths and what weaknesses might I have? Do you have any concerns about my ability to do the job? And then number 4, how do I stack up with the other candidates that you've interviewed? And get a really good idea and stop. And then the 4th one and most important one, what do I need to do to get the job? Now, I get candidates all the time that say, well, what if I don't want the job? You don't know whether you want the job or not until you get an offer. We had a candidate not too long ago that went into an interview for a controller's position. The job paid $175,000. He sold himself so well, they offered him $275,000. So you got to do it right and sell it right. Those 4 basic questions, they're killer questions. They are ones that you absolutely have to ask in order to get the job. And if you do a good job of that, if nothing else, you know exactly how you stand. So those are the 10 biggest mistakes that people make. There's a much broader presentation about this in the jobsearchsolution.com. So, any questions?
Yes, Daniel, why don't you unmute your mic and I'll let you ask your question.
Yeah, sure. So when I do company research, I can find a lot of general information about the company, but sometimes I want to ask specifically, like, so what does your team do? What's kind of the specific focus you're doing beyond the job description? Is that going to make me look like I haven't prepared well, or is there a good way to ask that?
No, that's not a bad way to ask it. You got to put it in context. It depends on how many other questions you might have, the rapport that you might be having with the interviewing authority or that kind of thing. That's a fair question, because no matter what anybody publishes on their website or no matter what anybody tells you, even in the lobby, there's always going to be a hidden lots going on in the company that you may not know about. That's a reasonable question. That's a reasonable question.
All right, thank you.
John's asking, can you please restate the 4 questions at the end of the interview that you want to ask again?
Sure. And the job search solution goes into these things in real detail. But the first one is, have I made it clear about what my experience is? And do you have any questions about my experience or background that I didn't make clear? Interestingly enough, although the other 3 are more pointed, that is probably one of the best questions you can ask, because I'll tell you, when people are asking you questions, they spend, I don't know, but it's probably 50% of their time thinking about the next question rather than what your answer is. I know employers that I work with that don't even take notes on the candidates they interview. I mean, that's crazy. You interview a candidate 2 weeks ago, unless you take copious notes, you don't remember who you talked to. You just don't. So lots of times you'll explain what you do and you think you've communicated, well, they know what I've done, but they don't. And you got to ask them, have I made it clear? So are there any questions about my experience and my background that I need to elaborate on? And I guarantee you, there's going to be one of those people in that group, or one person that's going to say, yeah, you know, this job you had two jobs ago, I don't really understand what you did there. Can you explain it to me? So that's really an important question. Then the second question is, do you have any concerns about my ability to do the job? Now, what you're going to find out there is, how are you stacking up? Are you long in some areas and short in other areas? Do you have, do they have any concerns? I had a candidate this morning. She asked that question, and it was a Zoom interview. And the group that she asked it with, one of them said, well, it doesn't appear in your background. I place primarily IT salespeople. It doesn't appear anywhere in your background where you've done financial application demos. And she said, oh, yes, I have. Well, part of their job is, as a salesperson in this company, is to be able to do WebEx demos. And this guy didn't get the idea that she had done that before. I guarantee you the other three people in that interview didn't get that idea either. If he didn't get it, they didn't get it. And so she was able to say, yes, in this job I had, and she pointed out the job she had, she said, I didn't even understand the software, and I learned it within a couple of 3 weeks of how to demo it. So asking that question about where am I strong and where am I weak is basically what you're doing. And then, how do I stack up with the other candidates that you've interviewed? Most employers don't know how to answer that question because they never get asked it. You would be surprised. You would be really surprised. I had a candidate ask that the other day, and they said, I don't know, you're the first one we've talked to. Okay, that's fair enough. But at least they'll give you an idea of how you stack up, and about the other people that were talked. I had a candidate a couple weeks ago ask that, and they said to the candidate, well, your skills are really good. We do have an internal candidate that we really like. Well, now what that tells the candidate is that an internal candidate most of the time always has an advantage because they know the person. They probably aren't as good as the candidates that, frankly, this sounds self-serving, that I can come up with. I can probably come up with better candidates than what they have internally, but they know the person. So my candidate knew then that he was up against an internal candidate he was going to have a hard time fighting that battle. And then the last one, and just real blunt, what do I need to do to get the job? And you'll be shocked at the number of people that you ask that of, that they just start laughing and they go, man, that's a good question. Nobody seems to ask that question. Now, the irony to all of this is I give people my job search solution, and on average, out of 4 candidates, even though I teach it, only one of them asks all of those 4 questions. I don't get it. I just don't understand. You need a job. I'm telling you some of the things you need to do to get it, and only 1 out of 4 asks it. And when I ask the other 3, why didn't you ask? Well, it just didn't seem appropriate. Well, I wasn't quite sure. Well, we ran out of time, blah, 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 blah. What it means is you just didn't have the courage to find out, where do you stand? Look, when you're looking for a job, no is the second best answer you can get. If you're not going to hire my candidate, let me know now. The sooner you let me know. I may not agree with it. I may not like it, but at least I know. No is no. That means we move on to the next one. Yes, no, those are great. It's that maybe that kills you. And that's where people spend most of, even I do, after all these years, spend the emotional time and effort in that maybe. So, and if you're not a candidate, that's fine. Find out quickly.
It's that age-old question of, they want you to talk about salary before they tell you what the range is. So how do you eloquently skirt around that?
Great question. get asked that all the time. Here's what I would say as a candidate. In the past, in my last job or my present job, I'm presently making or I've made X amount of dollars. I'm not as concerned about the amount of money as I'm concerned about the opportunity, the growth, and the people. So tell them what you've been earning, but don't say, this is what I'm looking for or this is what I need. Now, there are some, this is a paradox and this is screwball, but in the state of California, and I'm not sure if it's true in New York, but I know in the state of California, you can't ask people what they've been making when they're in the interview. Now, after you go to hire them, you can find out what they've been making. Now, that's stupid because if they've been making more than totally a lot more than what you're going to pay, then they're not going to get hired anyhow. So, I've had candidates, I say, what have you been making? And they say, I don't want to tell you. End of interview as far as I'm concerned. That's not going to fly. They may have reasons for doing it. They may not want me to know. Usually it's because they feel like they've been grossly underpaid. That has nothing to do with it. It has to do with, if I ask that question, in my opinion, in my business, I'm going to have to tell my client because they're going to ask me. And the candidates in the same thing. So don't tell them necessarily what you're looking for. Just say, this is what I've made in the past, but I'm flexible. If I've been out of work 6 months, I'm real flexible. If I've been out of work a year, I'm really, really, really flexible. If I'm on my present job and I'm leaving for maybe different reasons, I may not be as flexible, but they don't need to know that. This is what I've earned in the past. I'm open to the future. Whatever you do, and some guru I listen to stuff all the time on the internet about getting a job, and some yahoo was on there was saying that when you get asked that question, don't answer it, just ask the question, well, what does a job pay? Ugh. Any question that has to do with what are you going to do for me is a stupid question. Please don't do it.
So I've got a question for you. So of all the placements that you all make, that Babbage makes, what percentage of jobs do you already know what the salary is so you can prep the candidate when you're sending them in?
99% of them we know, and we're able to give them an idea what the range is. Sometimes people listen, sometimes they don't. We try to make it reasonable for the candidate, and the employer knows that we're going to do that. Sometimes employers tell us wrong. People, I read it in a book not too long ago because I'm reading this kind of stuff all the time, that companies are going to publish the mid-range of the salary. That's not necessarily true. I mean, they're going to publish whatever they publish. Just handle it by being just careful. You're going to have most of the time somewhat of an idea before you go in. What you don't want to do is price yourself out of the opportunity because there might be some really growth there. If money was the most important thing that people worked for, we'd all sell cocaine. I mean, it's ridiculous. So you answer the question by, this is what I've made in the past, but I'm interested in growth. And then stop.
Okay. Leslie, do you want to ask your question?
Okay, so I wanted to know what kind of an answer could I expect from asking, what do I need to do to get the job? I had no idea. What are they going to say? Are they going to say, you need to do this, this, and this, and do 3 leapfrogs? I had no idea.
Yeah, pat your head, rub your belly, and sing the national anthem. No, the issue, don't worry about the answer. The answer isn't anywhere near as important as the fact that you asked the question. They may not even have an answer. It's going to be an answer of some like, well, we've got 22 other candidates. I'm being facetious. We've got a few other candidates that we're going to talk to. We feel like that you have provided us all the information that we need, but we appreciate your asking. And then you can even come back. Is there anything else I can do to enhance my position? The fact that you had the guts to ask it and that you're willing to say, you're going to hire me or not, puts you in a light that is more courageous than most candidates. Most people are afraid somebody's going to say, nah, you're not going to get hired here anyhow. Well, okay, fine. You know, I mean, you're going to get 14 to 15 no's before you get a yes anyhow.
Just another little story. In the pit crew, we had a candidate once who and he came back and told us that after the interview or during the interview at the very end, he said, you know, I saw that empty desk out there. Would that be my desk? And the guy sort of like chuckled from it. And actually he did get the job because he took it to the next step.
I had a candidate one time that interviewed with the CEO. It's now $1 billion company. And the CEO said, it was not that big at the time, we'll let you know. And he one Monday morning, he showed up, went to one of the empty desks, opened up his briefcase, set his whole desk up. The CEO walks in and says, who's that guy? And the admin told him, she said, he's your new hire. He said, oh, okay, I guess so. Guy was there 15 years. He never really got offered the job. He took the job. Now, that's pretty gutsy, but you know, he made their decision for him. He wound up being a really good guy for the company. It takes guts. I don't know that I'd recommend that, but I mean, what's the worst? They throw you out? I mean, you know, so what?
Right.
I had a question about next steps, interview closing questions. Do you have any recommendation about how to ask those?
Sure. If depending on the answer you get from what do I need to do to get the job, I have some candidates that soften that by say, what's the next step? I don't like that because what they say is, well, the next step is we're going to have people back and we're going to do this and that and the other thing. Well, okay, then you might ask, how do I be certain that I'm going to be one of those? Okay. And look, you might as well be aggressive. Most candidates aren't. And they call me back and they say, well, they told me that the next steps are they're having people back next Tuesday. Well, are you going to be one of them? Well, I don't know. Well, you know where you stand. And, you know, what do I need to do to get the job? What are the other steps in the process? And am I going to be in, and you can say it nicely with a smile on your face, am I going to be in that group that comes back to speak with you all?
All right, that was Tony's presentation. It was pre-recorded, as I said at the very beginning of this. If anybody has any questions, you're welcome to unmute your mic. You're welcome to ask away. Just let me know. Anybody have any questions? Questions going once, questions going twice?
Jeff, this is David from Atlanta.
Hey, David.
I got a question that's very pertinent. Tomorrow I have my first phone screen interview with this company. It's just the first phone screen. I almost feel as if I'm asking for the job when I know it's going to be 2 or 3 more interviews down the road might not be appropriate. Instead, what are the next steps? Your thoughts?
I agree. I think that what you need to do is at the end of that, you need to say, so what are the next steps in the interview process? Are there any questions I haven't answered? I mean, it's a good chance it could be very preliminary. Here are 10 questions we ask each of our phone candidates and we move on. A question I do have that I would maybe start the conversation with is, can you tell me what was it? I mean, I assume they found you on LinkedIn, they found you via an application, they found you via your resume. What was it about my whatever made you pick up the phone and call me?
I have that written down. You ask. That's
Because if you
that's-
ask that at the beginning and you know what their hot button is, you then know what to focus on for, for most of the interview to make sure that you address those situations, and then be sure at the very end, to just wrap up. You said at the very beginning, what you really need is somebody who can do this. I've performed these skills X, Y, and Z times, and I'm here to help you. And that's the other thing. Just be sure to keep reinforcing that you're just here to help them. What can you do to solve their problems?
perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Good luck tomorrow.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Anybody else have any questions? Going once, going twice? All right. Well, let me share a couple of closing screens and we will get out of here. Career FW and Career USA, we're putting on training 4 days a week. Hopefully you will join us. Tomorrow, Thursday, being the 4th Thursday of the month, we will talk about networking. Networking to network with Locke Alderson. So please join us tomorrow at 1 o'clock. And this Friday at the North Dallas Plano Career Focus Group meeting, Sarah Jacobs will be with us from the Thomas Edward Group. That's a recruiting firm, just like Tony Beshara's is. And she'll be talking about recruiters lifting the curtain, sort of random thoughts from a recruiter, how you deal with recruiters, the different kinds of recruiters, and things you can do to help your situation when you're dealing with retained recruiters. This session has been recorded. It will be on the Career DFW Facebook page and the Career USA YouTube channel. One of the things that's also on the Career USA YouTube channel is the 13-part workshop that Walt and Mark put together. And you're welcome to go back and view these at any time. The first 5 sessions all talk about how to prepare for the interview, what you need to do before the interview, getting your star stories ready, how to handle video interviewing, analyzing the job description, very, very important. The next 5 sessions all talk about what to do during the interview. So these are things that are going to happen during the interview, how to open the interview, how to close the interview, demonstrating enthusiasm, how to ask questions during the interview. And then the last 3 are some advanced topics on how you can shorten your job search, how to handle difficult interviewers and difficult questions. And then the very last topic is a good one, avoiding interview crashes. As often as good as you think you are at interviewing, people make some of these same common mistakes, and that's what they sort of point out in this last session. So that's about 20 hours of materials. You're welcome to go view any of these. They're all on the Career USA YouTube channel. Just go down, click on playlist where you see the green arrow, and then down below, pick whichever session you want. Resumes, North Dallas, Plano interviewing. In this case, pick the interviewing one. At the very, very bottom, it says click view full playlist. And when you do that, up will come all the sessions, including this one. I'll have this one uploaded in the next couple hours. And you can go back and watch any of these at your leisure. Just scroll down to find the session that you'd like to go back and watch over again. If you're not receiving emails about our workshops, please join the Career USA mailing list. You may do so by sending an email to Career USA, the +subscribe at groups.io. You will never be spam because I control it. The only emails you will get is the topic of the day, the title of the topic of the day, and most importantly, the Zoom link of the day. That way you can grab your lunch and learn with us. It just makes it easy. So please consider joining our mailing list so you can find our sessions that are popping up if you're not getting it any other place. Please remember, Career FW, we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization. All of our speakers are volunteers. I'm a volunteer. Everything I've done over the last 13 years has been to help you land your next great opportunity. The object is we never want to see you here again. We need more taxpayers, people paying their taxes. And so that's what our goal is, just to get everybody hired and to teach you the skills you need. Please consider making a donation when you do get your next job so we can continue to provide the services that we do provide. So thank you very much for joining us today, everybody. Have a great afternoon, and hopefully we'll see you tomorrow.